Welcome to True Echo, where real strength isn't loud, but unstoppable. Today's story will leave you breathless, as one brave girl turns silent suffering into a battle cry heard around the nation. You've never seen courage like this. The early morning sun filtered through the blinds of a freshly painted room still filled with moving boxes. Aaliyah Brooks sat quietly on her bed, her black belt folded neatly beside her. At just 16, she'd seen more than most adults twice her age. From growing up in Detroit's roughest neighborhoods to earning a national-level black belt in Taekwondo, Aaliyah's journey had been anything but ordinary. But Crestwood High wasn't ready for someone like her. Her mother, Dr. Aaliyah Brooks, had accepted a position at the local hospital, uprooting their lives in the hope of giving Aaliyah a safer, quieter environment. But safety, as they both would learn, doesn't always come in the form of quiet streets and smiling neighbors. In Crestwood, violence didn't wear gang colors, it wore varsity jackets, pearl earrings, and privilege. That first morning, Aaliyah woke early, descended into the basement dojo they'd set up just days before, and began her ritual. The echo of her bare feet hitting the mat, her breathing controlled and rhythmic, centered her. Each movement, precise, powerful, deliberate, was more than practice. It was armor. Upstairs, her mother stood in the kitchen doorway, watching with tired but proud eyes. "Up early again, sweetheart?" she asked gently, still in her scrubs from the overnight ER shift. Trying to stay centered, Aaliyah replied, slipping her gloves into her canvas bag. "First days today." Dr. Monique walked over and kissed the top of her daughter's head. "Remember, Crestwood might look calm, but you don't need to prove anything. Your strength is knowing when to hold back. Keep your head high, and never apologize for who you are." Aaliyah nodded, silently repeating her mantra: patience, control, dignity. But as soon as her mother's car rolled through Crestwood High's arched gates, that calm resolve was tested. The building was pristine, the lawns manicured, the hallways spotless. But every glance told her she didn't belong. As she adjusted the strap of her backpack and searched for her locker, a pair of cold blue eyes watched her closely. Chase Turner, student body president, football team captain, and the unchallenged king of Crestwood, stood leaning against a locker like he owned the world. Beside him, Logan Price and Trent Miller flanked his sides like trained attack dogs. The moment Chase's eyes locked on Aaliyah, she felt it. The trap was set. "You sure you're in the right place?" Chase asked with a smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. His tone was cordial, but loaded with warning. Aaliyah gave a polite nod. "I think so." Chase tilted his head, amused. "Everyone pays the fee here. Sooner or later." Logan and Trent chuckled behind him, their smiles shark-like. Unfazed, Aaliyah gave the faintest smile. "I don't believe in paying for protection. That's not school tradition, it's extortion." Her calm reply didn't sit well. Chase stepped aside, but not without whispering, "Let's see how long that confidence lasts." That afternoon, Aaliyah's locker was jammed with purple gum. Her gym shirt was defaced with racial slurs. A cruel note, taped to a banana and slapped on her locker, read, "Welcome to the jungle." Logan captured it all on video, laughing behind a nearby column. But Aaliyah didn't flinch. She tore down the paper, tossed the banana in the trash, and walked to class. Yet the real ambush came in English class. During a discussion of To Kill a Mockingbird, Chase raised his hand and, with a twisted grin, said, "Maybe Aaliyah could tell us about racism. Detroit must have been a great education." The room went still. Miss Harper looked cornered. But Aaliyah stood, eyes unwavering. "Courage isn't about where you come from," she said evenly. "It's about what you protect when you stand alone." Chase clapped mockingly. "You speak well, for someone from there." Still, Aaliyah didn't falter. "Maybe what we fear most is hearing the truth from someone we've already judged." Behind her, a few students lowered their eyes. One or two nodded quietly. Chase didn't speak again that day. But he didn't have to. That evening, a slickly edited video appeared online. It twisted Aaliyah's classroom comments into a hate-filled rant, painting her as a radical. Within hours, she was receiving anonymous threats. "Get out of Crestwood. You don't belong here. We'll make sure you're gone." Aaliyah curled up that night with her phone buzzing beside her. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. But her soul hurt. Then came a single text from Jordan Scott, the only other black student in their class. He rarely spoke, but his message landed like a lifeline. "I know the video's fake. Chase did this to someone else too. Don't react. They want you to explode. Just hold on. Truth always finds its way." Aaliyah sat upright, staring at the message. The fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. The next morning, Crestwood High looked exactly the same from the outside: pristine bricks, polished windows, proud banners fluttering in the breeze. But for Aaliyah, each step through those doors felt like wading into enemy territory. Every whisper, every averted gaze, every fake smile, it all buzzed like white noise around her. Her classmates weren't just ignoring her anymore. They were watching, waiting, pushing her toward a reaction. But they didn't know she'd grown up sprinting through alleyways in Detroit where real threats didn't laugh in front of a camera, they followed you home. Taekwondo hadn't just taught her how to fight. It taught her how to survive. Still, even that discipline was tested when Chase Turner's group ramped things up. That Friday after school, Aaliyah headed to the far end of the parking lot, just wanting to reach the sidewalk without confrontation. But Logan, Trent, and Chase were already there. This time, they weren't pretending. This was no hallway prank. This was personal. "You're still walking around like you own this place?" Chase growled, stepping in front of her. Logan shoved her shoulder. "You think people respect you now because of one speech?" Trent yanked her backpack and flung it into a puddle. "Time to teach you how Crestwood really works." Phones were already out. Students filming. Watching. They thought they were about to see the fall of the tough girl. Instead, they witnessed a transformation. With a sharp pivot, Aaliyah caught Logan's arm mid-reach, twisted it behind his back, and dropped him to the pavement in one seamless move. Trent charged her, but she sidestepped, hooked his ankle, and sent him sprawling. Chase hesitated, just a flicker of doubt, but lunged anyway. She turned, blocked, locked his arm, and held him just inches from the asphalt. Gasps spread like wildfire. A beat of silence. Then, cheers. She just dropped them. "Did you get that on video?" "Yo, she's a black belt for real." Aaliyah let go, stepping back. Calm. Focused. Not one movement wasted. Not one strike made out of anger. "If you want to keep going," she said coolly, "I'm right here." Chase didn't speak. His mouth was open, face red with humiliation, eyes darting toward the phones. That video spread through every group chat by nightfall. For the first time, Crestwood saw Aaliyah not as a target, but as a storm. Someone who didn't just survive their cruelty. Someone who turned it into strength. The next day, the atmosphere had changed. Kids who had once mocked her now looked at her with something closer to admiration. And the ones who had always walked the hallways with their heads down. They started to look up. By lunch, students she'd never spoken to began whispering thank yous. A few even asked if she could teach them how to protect themselves. But Aaliyah wasn't fooled. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because at the far end of the lunchroom, Chase sat in silence. His hands clenched. Logan and Trent barely touched their food. The shame burned brighter than any bruise. And their hatred hadn't disappeared. It had evolved. The next afternoon, Aaliyah was approached by Emma Reed and Chloe Parker, two of the smallest girls in school. Emma's voice trembled as she clutched her backpack strap. "Please, we didn't know who else to ask. Brad Walker and his guys, they wait for us at the bus stop. They block the path. Sometimes they shove us. They laugh, film it. We're scared to even take the bus. Aaliyah didn't hesitate. I'll walk with you tomorrow. That Friday afternoon, Brad and his boys swaggered toward the girls like they did every week, until they saw Aaliyah standing calmly between them. Brad smirked. Oh look, it's the Kung Fu Queen. Aaliyah's voice was level. You're going to leave them alone. Or you're going to regret it. He reached for Emma's shoulder. Big mistake. Aaliyah struck like lightning, blocking the grab, redirecting the force, then sweeping Brad's feet out from under him. Sean lunged. She sidestepped, pivoted, and used his own weight to slam him down. Marcus barely moved before he found himself pinned to the ground, arm twisted gently but firmly, unable to rise. Phones were up again. Gasps echoed through the air. But no one dared interrupt. Emma and Chloe watched, stunned, as their tormentors scrambled back like wounded dogs. And just like that, the myth of Crestwood's untouchable bullies shattered once more. But the problem with exposing monsters? They don't disappear. They just start planning in the dark. By Monday morning, Aaliyah's name had become a lightning rod. Across Crestwood and even in surrounding districts, students flooded social media with hashtags like hashtag Taekwondo girl, hashtag justice for Aaliyah, and hashtag fearless at Crestwood. Overnight, she'd gone from being that quiet new girl to an underground icon, admired by some, feared by others, and utterly despised by the ones she'd embarrassed. That weekend's bus stop showdown had been recorded from 3 angles and edited into a video montage that racked up thousands of views. But with every repost came more backlash. And this time, it wasn't just whispers. It was war. Brad Walker, Chase Turner, and the entire clique of former school royalty gathered that night in Brad's garage, once the center of their prank planning and inside jokes. Now it was a war room. Their faces were masks of bruised pride and cold fury. We're a joke, Logan spat, slamming his fist onto a metal table. Even the underclassmen laugh when we walk past. Chase didn't speak. He just stared at his phone screen where Aaliyah's video played again, her hands blurring with precision, her face calm as she neutralized 3 of them with surgical efficiency. His jaw tightened. Brad, red-faced and seething, finally said what they were all thinking. If we fight her again, we just make her more famous. She wins every time she moves. For a moment, the room fell into heavy silence. Then Trent Miller, never the brightest but always the meanest, grinned and said, "Then we don't fight her with fists." He leaned forward, voice low. "We fight her with the law." "What?" Logan blinked. "We say she attacked us. Say she's dangerous. We get our parents involved. Make her look like a violent nut job. Our folks know the police, the school board, even a couple lawyers. Let them bury her. All we have to do is act scared." Brad's eyes gleamed. "We flipped the script. She's not a hero, she's a threat." And just like that, their plan began. By the next day, Chase's father, a prominent businessman and school donor, filed a formal complaint. Brad's family backed it up with a fabricated list of violent threats Aaliyah had allegedly made. Logan and Trent submitted matching statements. It was coordinated, polished, and filled with legal buzzwords. And when Aaliyah stepped into the front entrance of Crestwood High on Wednesday morning, she had no idea what was coming. The sirens pierced the air like a blade. 2 police officers entered the front hallway as the school fell into stunned silence. "Aaliyah Brooks," one officer called out. "You are under investigation for multiple counts of unprovoked assault and threats against fellow students." The words echoed like gunfire. Whispers turned to gasps. Phones emerged from backpacks. And then, click. Snap. Record. Aaliyah didn't flinch. Her eyes searched the hallway, not for escape, but for understanding. And when none came, she simply nodded and handed over her bag. Outside, as she was led toward the police car, a cluster of her classmates gathered, some in horror, others in guilty silence. Emma, Chloe, Jordan, they all watched helplessly. From a second-story window, Chase and his crew watched too, smugness returned to their faces like a second skin. They'd done it. They'd flipped the narrative. But they didn't know what was coming next. Because less than 15 minutes after Aaliyah was driven off campus, a storm began to rise. Jordan Scott, who had long chosen silence as safety, stepped forward for the first time in his Crestwood life. He stood in the courtyard and began chanting, "Justice for Aaliyah. Justice for Aaliyah." At first, it was just him. Then Emma and Chloe joined. Then a dozen more. By the end of first period, nearly half the school was gathered outside, holding handmade signs, chanting, crying, and demanding the truth. Inside the break room of Crestwood General Hospital, Dr. Monique Brooks dropped a tray of patient charts the moment she got the call. "Your daughter's been arrested." In scrubs and trembling with fury, she raced to the police station. The front office staff at Crestwood tried to explain, but the look in Monique's eyes silenced every excuse. At the police station, Aaliyah sat quietly, still in her school uniform, across from two officers, a public school attorney, and her mother, now livid but composed. "This is insane," Monique hissed. "Where's the evidence?" "We have written statements," one officer replied lamely. "That's not evidence," snapped a new voice from the doorway. It was Evelyn Howard, a middle-aged black woman with sharp eyes and a sterling reputation as a public defender. She placed a thick folder on the table. "What you do have, gentlemen, is an avalanche of video evidence proving Aaliyah acted in self-defense, and dozens of students ready to testify." Monique blinked. I'm your daughter's new attorney. Pro bono. I saw the videos. I read the comments. And I don't like seeing young people railroaded by corrupt influence and cowardice." That night, Evelyn Howard, Monique, and Aaliyah sat around their kitchen table with Emma, Chloe, Jordan, and nearly a dozen students who had once been bullied by Chase's crew. They came not just to help, but to fight. By Friday, they had testimonies, signed affidavits, videos, and timelines. Crestwood's old hierarchy was about to be dragged into the light. The sun rose slowly over Crestwood that Friday morning, but tension had already reached a boiling point. Outside the municipal courthouse, reporters gathered, students swarmed, and parents lined the sidewalk, some out of support, others curiosity, and a few, bitter denial. Camera flashes blinked like lightning. Whispers darted from one cluster of people to the next. And in the center of it all stood Aaliyah Brooks, back straight, uniform ironed, eyes clear. Her mother, Dr. Monique Brooks, gripped her hand tightly. To her left stood Evelyn Howard, dignified and commanding in a navy blue suit, her expression calm but razor-focused. Behind them, Emma, Chloe, Jordan, and nearly 20 students ready to testify, not just for Aaliyah, but for everyone who had ever been cornered and silenced at Crestwood. In the courtroom, the boys who had once ruled the halls with arrogant ease now sat huddled at the plaintiff's table in pressed shirts and strained expressions. Chase Turner looked gaunt. Brad Walker's leg bounced nervously. Logan and Trent couldn't seem to make eye contact with anyone. Their families filled the front two rows of the gallery, lawyers, donors, socialites, and old money. All clinging to the illusion that wealth could still clean up the mess. Judge Henderson entered the chamber, commanding silence without uttering a word. His reputation for integrity preceded him. His presence alone turned the courtroom into a crucible. "We are here today," he began, "to determine the legitimacy of the charges brought against Aaliyah Brooks, a student, a minor, and a recognized black belt in martial arts, by 6 of her classmates. The burden of proof lies with the prosecution." The first to speak was Chase. His voice, carefully coached, quivered. She threatened us. She said we'd regret it. That she wasn't afraid to hurt people like us. I was scared every time I saw her. I couldn't sleep. Then Logan. She slammed me to the ground for no reason. My shoulder still clicks when I lift it. Trent added his spin. I never even touched her. She just attacked me. It was like she lost control. Brad's voice was the most performative. She shoved me at the bus stop. My little sister saw the video online and had nightmares. The courtroom remained eerily quiet, save for a few stifled coughs and camera clicks. Then Evelyn Howard stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. With your Honor's permission, she said, we will now present verified video footage from multiple student sources, unedited, showing each alleged incident. The lights dimmed slightly as the courtroom screen came to life. First, the parking lot video. Chase's group surrounding Aaliyah. Blocking her path. Laughing. Logan shoving her. Then came the takedown, fast, controlled, efficient. Aaliyah's body moved with precision, never pursuing once her attackers hit the ground. Next, the bus stop. Brad reaching for Emma. Aaliyah stepping between them. The strike that knocked Brad back. The sweep that disarmed Sean. Marcus lunging, only to be thrown gently to the pavement. Then the sound that silenced the room, students in the background cheering, not out of malice, but relief. Safety. Justice. When the lights came back on, no one on the plaintiff's side looked up. Miss Howard called her witnesses. Emma and Chloe testified first. Voices trembling but steady. She saved us. We were scared to walk home. They followed us, taunted us. No one else stepped in. Jordan followed. They pushed kids around for years. No one said anything because of who their parents were. Aaliyah never attacked anyone. She only defended. Even the gym teacher testified. I've seen her form. That girl could do real damage if she wanted to. But she doesn't. She has control most adults wish they had. Then Miss Howard brought in two final voices, Aaliyah's old Taekwondo coach, who testified to her discipline, national medals, and deep understanding of restraint. And a martial arts ethics instructor who explained, in clear terms, the philosophy that governed Aaliyah's every move. Her style teaches protection. Not violence. What you saw was self-defense, rooted in ethics and responsibility. Judge Henderson listened. Every word. Every expression. Every uncomfortable twitch from the boys at the plaintiff's table. When the time came for closing statements, Evelyn Howard's voice rang through the courtroom. This is not a case of a violent child. This is a case of fear, fear of a young black girl who wouldn't bow. Who didn't stay silent. The boys on the other side of this courtroom weren't victims. They were rulers of a kingdom built on intimidation. And Aaliyah Brooks, by defending herself, dared to burn that kingdom down. Silence. Then, Judge Henderson spoke. I find no evidence to support claims of unprovoked aggression. All videos and testimonies clearly show that Aaliyah Brooks acted within the boundaries of self-defense. She is cleared of all charges. Cheers erupted in the gallery. But the judge wasn't finished. As for the plaintiffs, he continued, this court finds credible evidence of collusion, false accusations, and malicious intent. I order immediate suspension of all 6 students involved. Further, I recommend a full investigation into their parents' attempts to obstruct justice. Now it was Chase, Brad, Logan, and Trent's turn to be silent. Pale. Shaking. Their empire had crumbled. And everyone had seen it happen. The courtroom's echo of Judge Henderson's ruling hadn't even faded before Crestwood High began to feel the tremors of revolution. Outside, dozens of students clapped and cheered in the parking lot, many holding signs they'd made themselves. Justice for Aaliyah no longer felt like just a chant, it was a movement. Reporters scrambled to capture reactions, while several parents who had once kept their heads low now stood tall, pride glowing on their faces. Aaliyah, flanked by her mother and Miss Howard, stepped out into the light. A few feet away, Emma and Chloe waited, no longer trembling, but smiling with quiet joy. Jordan, usually quiet and reserved, gave a rare fist pump in the air, his pride unmistakable. But even in the wave of celebration, Aaliyah remained centered. Her victory didn't feel like revenge. It felt like release. As they walked through the front doors of Crestwood the next day, everything was different. Not just the stairs, but the energy. Students who used to walk with hunched shoulders now held their heads high. Some offered high fives. Others whispered, "Thank you," as she passed. In classrooms, even teachers addressed her with new respect. The administration moved quickly to mend the broken trust. Within 48 hours, they made a formal public apology to Aaliyah and announced that a new anti-bullying initiative would be launched, with student-led panels and peer support groups. But the biggest shift came from the students themselves. They didn't just want a safer school, they wanted a new culture. A few days later, flyers appeared across campus. Taekwondo Club, Empower Yourself. Open to all. Led by Aaliyah Brooks. On the first day, they expected maybe a dozen kids. Nearly 80 showed up. The gym overflowed with students of every background, nerds, athletes, outcasts, and even a few former cronies of Chase Turner. Some came for self-defense. Others came to stand for something bigger than themselves. Aaliyah stood at the front of the gym in her crisp white dobok, her black belt tied firmly around her waist. Emma, Chloe, and Jordan stood to her side, assistants and friends. "Before we begin," she said, her voice calm but strong, "this is about more than just learning to fight. It's about knowing your worth. Standing your ground. And protecting others when no one else will." Every pair of eyes in the room locked onto her with awe. As she guided them through basic stances and breathing techniques, she also wove in lessons on resilience, emotional control, and discipline. The kind of strength that didn't come from kicking someone down, but from lifting yourself up. The club became Crestwood's fastest-growing group. By the end of the month, the administration moved Aaliyah's class into the main auditorium. Teachers dropped in to observe. Some even asked to participate. The principal publicly praised her, calling her a catalyst for the change this school desperately needed. But the transformation didn't stop with Crestwood. Across town, at neighboring schools like Maple Ridge and Elmsbrook, students began forming their own Empower Yourself clubs. Videos of Aaliyah's courtroom victory and Taekwondo teaching spread online, racking up millions of views. Parents reached out to Dr. Monique Brooks with stories of children who no longer cried before school. One even said their child started practicing breathing exercises every morning because that girl in the video said it helps you stay calm. The ripple effect had begun. Still, Aaliyah never let the praise change her. She showed up early to practice, stayed late to help stragglers, and listened to every story whispered to her after class by students who once lived in fear. And then, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, after everyone had left the gym, a knock echoed through the side doors. Aaliyah turned to find Trent Miller, eyes downcast, clutching a tattered gym bag. "I know I'm the last person you want to see," he said. "But I was wondering if I could join." She studied him quietly, then nodded once. "If you're serious." "I am," he said softly. "I don't want to be who I was anymore." Over the next few weeks, more followed. Logan. Even Marcus from Riverside. They came not as kings, but as humbled learners. They were clumsy, awkward, often frustrated. But they showed up. Again and again. And Aaliyah, without malice, taught them. Because true power, she believed, wasn't in domination. It was in transformation. The late winter sunlight filtered through the gymnasium's high windows as Aaliyah guided a room full of students through a new drill. Every movement was sharp, deliberate. The sound of synchronized breathing and the soft rhythm of feet brushing the mat filled the space like a quiet symphony of discipline. But it wasn't just the techniques that were transforming the students, it was what the club stood for. What Aaliyah stood for. In one corner, Emma helped a shy freshman adjust her stance. Nearby, Chloe demonstrated a block, encouraging a boy who had once been a regular target in the locker room. At the far edge of the mat, Jordan sat with a small group, leading a circle talk about setting boundaries and recognizing emotional triggers. This wasn't just self-defense training anymore. It was healing. Aaliyah walked among the students, observing, correcting, encouraging. When she stopped near Trent, who was quietly practicing a sequence alone, he looked up, hesitant. Still working on the reverse kick, he muttered. Can't get the balance right. You will, she said. It's not about being fast. It's about staying grounded. Trent paused, then looked up again. I know I haven't said it enough, but, thank you for letting me in. After everything. Aaliyah offered a small smile. We all make choices. The important thing is we choose better the next time. That single sentence echoed in Trent's mind for days. Soon after, he stood during a Respect Week assembly and publicly apologized to the entire school, not just for what he had done to Aaliyah, but for every time he laughed at someone else's pain. It was raw, awkward, and full of stops and starts. But it was real. And it sparked something no one expected. Other students began standing up, too. I stood by and said nothing when my friend was bullied. I'm sorry. I used to send anonymous DMs to make fun of people. I didn't realize how much it could hurt. I want to do better. By the end of the assembly, over a dozen students had spoken, and the crowd responded with respectful silence, not mockery, not shame. Crestwood had changed. And the change spread beyond the gym. The administration, inspired by the student movement, introduced new curriculum modules focused on empathy, digital citizenship, and restorative justice. They launched a peer mediation program co-led by students and counselors. Hallways once ruled by fear now featured art projects, quote boards, and safe corners, where anyone could ask for help without judgment. Even Chase Turner's absence was quietly felt. After the court ruling, his family withdrew him from Crestwood and relocated out of state. Some said he'd gone to boarding school. Others whispered he'd broken down emotionally. Whatever the truth, Aaliyah refused to gloat. She didn't want a ruined life. She wanted a better one, for everyone. But one day, a letter appeared in her locker. It was unmarked, folded neatly. The handwriting was jagged and unsteady. Aaliyah. I don't expect forgiveness. But I wanted you to know that I've started therapy. I've begun asking myself why I needed power over others to feel seen. You beat me, not just physically, but morally. And that saved more than just the people I hurt, it might have saved me, too. Chase. Aaliyah read it 3 times, standing still in the hallway. She didn't show the letter to anyone. But that night, when she stepped into the basement and trained in silence, her strikes were more fluid than they had ever been. Not angry. Not forceful. Liberated. Weeks turned to months. The Taekwondo club's enrollment swelled to over 120 students. A few teachers volunteered to become assistant instructors. Some parents even asked if there could be a weekend session for adults. One Saturday morning, as Aaliyah prepared for class, her mother called her to the front porch. There, on a worn bench, sat a cardboard box. Inside were over 40 handwritten letters. Some from schools in Illinois. Others from as far away as Oregon and Florida. Letters from kids who had seen the videos. Read the articles. Watched Crestwood change and wondered, could it happen here too? One letter stood out. It read. Dear Aaliyah. I was scared to go to school every day. Then I saw your story. I stood up last week for a kid everyone used to bully. He cried and hugged me. That's when I knew what courage looked like. I hope one day I get to thank you in person. You gave me hope. Tears blurred Aaliyah's vision. She wiped them away slowly, her hands steady. That afternoon, she entered the gym with renewed purpose. Not to fight. To lead. Because she finally understood. Her battle had never been just hers. It belonged to every silent voice that refused to stay silent any longer. Spring arrived in Crestwood like a long-awaited breath. Blossoms filled the trees, students spilled across the lawn at lunch, and for the first time in years, there was laughter in the halls that didn't come at someone else's expense. But the biggest transformation was not seen in the landscaping or the test scores. It was in the eyes of the students, once guarded, now open. Once suspicious, now trusting. And leading that quiet revolution stood Aaliyah Brooks, the girl who had once walked into Crestwood as a target and now walked through its halls as a symbol of resilience. One Friday morning, the school hosted its first annual Inspiration Assembly, an idea proposed by the very students who once stayed silent. The auditorium was full, the air buzzing with nervous anticipation. Aaliyah sat near the stage, flanked by Emma, Chloe, Jordan, and Trent. Teachers stood along the walls, proud but quietly emotional. Parents lined the back rows. Dr. Monique Brooks sat near the center, tears already shining in her eyes. The principal took the mic first. This year, we saw something we've never seen before, the complete transformation of our school culture, not because of rules, not because of policies, but because of courage. He turned to Aaliyah. Aaliyah Brooks, please come forward. She rose slowly, the weight of the moment pressing into her shoulders, not in fear, but in honor. She walked up the steps and turned to face the student body, hundreds of faces watching her with admiration and gratitude. She took a breath, steady as always. When I first came to Crestwood, she began, I didn't feel brave. I felt small. Alone. Targeted. But I also knew something important, that I had a choice. Not to fight out of anger. Not to run away in fear. But to stand in truth. She glanced around the room. And what I learned is that you don't change a school by yourself. You do it one person at a time. With every ally. Every voice that refuses to stay quiet. Every act of kindness that breaks the cycle of cruelty. Every no that says, you don't get to treat people like that anymore. Silence. Then, a growing wave of applause. Not thunderous. Not explosive. But reverent. Powerful. Real. As she stepped down, the applause only grew louder. That afternoon, the school presented Aaliyah with the Crestwood Unity Award, created in her honor and to be awarded annually to students who demonstrated integrity, courage, and leadership in the face of injustice. And then came the surprise. Miss Evelyn Howard stepped on stage, clutching a stack of envelopes. These are from schools across the country, she said. They've heard what happened here. And they want to start Empower Yourself programs too. She turned to Aaliyah and smiled. Looks like you've started something much bigger than just one school. After the assembly, students poured into the gym for one of the largest Taekwondo club sessions to date. The mats were filled edge to edge. Even a few younger siblings of students had joined, sitting crisscross on the sidelines, watching in awe. That afternoon, Aaliyah watched as Jordan led warm-ups. Emma corrected a new student's form. Trent guided a former rival through a breathing exercise. She sat quietly on the edge of the mat, just for a moment, letting it all wash over her. Crestwood didn't just feel different. It was different. Because of one girl's decision not to fight with fists, but with principle. Not to destroy, but to build. Not to hate, but to heal. Later that evening, as the sunset cast gold across the school courtyard, Aaliyah stood alone under the tree near the main entrance, the same place she had first felt the cold sting of being othered. Now, a small plaque stood beneath that tree. In honor of those who stand when it's hardest to. You are stronger than you think. She traced her fingers along the engraving and smiled, not just for herself, but for everyone who would come after her. Because Aaliyah Brooks hadn't just survived Crestwood. She'd changed it. Forever. Sometimes, the strongest voice comes from the quietest girl. And sometimes, the greatest victory isn't in defeating your enemies, but in transforming the world around you. Aaliyah's journey shows us that one person, armed with discipline, courage, and compassion, can ignite change far beyond their own battle. What would you do if the world tried to silence your voice? Let us know your thoughts and stories in the comments below, because your voice matters, too. If this story moved you, please subscribe to True Echo, share it with a friend who needs hope, and stay tuned for more powerful stories of truth, courage, and the echoes that never fade.